Welcome to Lead in English, the podcast from BEAL, the Business English Academy for Leadership and Management, Episode 6. I'm Darren. Today we are tackling one of the most important and most misunderstood skills in international business English: giving and receiving feedback. And I have two guests who know this territory very well. Ryan is American, based in Germany. Sofia is Spanish, working across German and international business. Both of them have had to completely rewire how they give feedback when working in English across cultures. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Darren. This is a topic I feel very strongly about. I spent my first year in Germany thinking I was being a great manager, giving people lots of feedback, clear, direct, American-style feedback. And then I had a one-to-one with one of my German colleagues, and she said very calmly, "Ryan, I find your feedback style quite difficult to process." And I was like, wait, what? I thought I was being helpful.
Yes, and in Spain we have the opposite problem. We are very warm, very relational. We might say something like, "That was really good," and maybe just one small thing to think about. And the person leaves thinking they did an amazing job, when actually the small thing was the main thing. We protect the relationship so much that sometimes the feedback gets lost.
And this is the central challenge. Different cultures have completely different ideas about what good feedback looks like. And when you are working in English as an international language, you need to understand not just how to say the feedback, but how it will land. Let's start with the three cultural frameworks. Ryan, walk us through the American feedback model.
So Americans typically use what we call the feedback sandwich. You start with something positive, then you give the criticism, then you end with something positive again. Positive, negative, positive. It sounds great in theory. In practice, the problem is that the positive parts can completely drown out the negative. I have given feedback to American colleagues where I said, "You did a great job on the structure, the content needs work, but your energy was fantastic." And they walked away thinking, "Great job." The middle part just disappeared.
Now, the German approach is quite different. In German professional culture, feedback is direct, specific, and separated from emotion. You do not soften it with positives. You do not add warmth. You say what was wrong, you say why it was wrong, and you say what needs to change. This can feel brutal to an American or a Spaniard. But the logic is sound. It is precise, it is respectful of the person's intelligence, and it is actionable. There is no ambiguity.
And the Spanish approach, and I think this is true of many Latin cultures, is much more relational. Feedback is given privately, gently, and with a lot of context about the relationship. You would never criticize someone in front of others. You protect their dignity. The feedback is wrapped in warmth and care, but as I said, sometimes the actual message gets so wrapped up that it does not arrive.
So phrase one for giving feedback in international English: the specific and respectful frame. This is, "I want to give you some specific feedback on this. Can I share it now?" That phrase does three things. It signals that feedback is coming, so the person is not blindsided. It uses the word specific, which signals to Germans that you are going to be precise and not vague. And it asks permission, which signals respect to Spanish and American colleagues. One phrase, three cultures covered.
I love that. Because one of my biggest early mistakes was just launching into feedback without any signal. In America, that is fine. We are used to it. But in Germany, I noticed people would get quite tense. They needed a moment to prepare themselves. That phrase gives them that moment.
Now, the content of the feedback itself. Phrase two, the behavior impact structure. Instead of saying, "You were disorganized in that meeting," which is a judgment, you say, "In the meeting, when the agenda changed without notice, it made it difficult for the team to prepare their contributions." You describe the behavior, then you describe the impact. No judgment, no emotion, just observation and consequence. This works across all three cultures because it is objective. Germans respect the precision, Americans feel it is fair, and Spanish colleagues feel it is professional rather than personal.
This changed how I give feedback completely. In Spanish culture, we often mix the behavior and the emotion together. We say it felt a bit chaotic, which is vague and personal. When I started separating the behavior from the impact, people received it so much better. Even my Spanish colleagues.
Now let's talk about receiving feedback, because this is equally important and often more difficult. Ryan, what happens when an American receives very direct German feedback?
It can be a shock. I had a German colleague review a report I had written, and she said, very matter-of-factly, this structure does not work. The argument is not clear, and the conclusion comes too late. No softening, no, but there are some good things here. Just this does not work. And my American brain heard, you are bad at this, you have failed, this is a disaster. It took me a while to realize she was just being efficient. She was not being unkind. She was giving me exactly the information I needed to fix it.
Phrase 3 for receiving feedback. The clarifying response. When you receive feedback that feels abrupt or unclear, instead of reacting emotionally, you say, "Thank you. Can you help me understand specifically what you would change?" That phrase does several things. It shows you have heard the feedback. It does not get defensive, and it moves the conversation forward into solutions. It works whether you are receiving German directness, British understatement, or American sandwich feedback.
I use this all the time now, because in international meetings sometimes I receive feedback that I am not sure how to interpret. Is this a small comment or a serious concern? Is this British understatement meaning it is actually terrible? That phrase, "Can you help me understand specifically what you would change?" forces the other person to be precise, and that precision helps me understand the real weight of the feedback.
Now, giving feedback upwards to your manager. This is where many people freeze completely. Because the cultural rules are different, the power dynamic is different, and the stakes feel higher. Sofia, how does this work in Spanish business culture?
In Spain, you almost never give direct feedback to your manager. It would be seen as disrespectful or as challenging their authority. You might hint at something or raise a concern very indirectly, but you would not say, "I think your decision was wrong." In Germany, I have seen people give quite direct feedback to senior managers in meetings, and the managers receive it well because it is expected. For me, watching that for the first time was extraordinary.
In America, it depends enormously on the company culture. In some companies, feedback upward is encouraged and celebrated. In others, it is career limiting. But in general, Americans frame upward feedback as a question rather than a statement. You do not say, "I think you made the wrong call." You say, "I want to make sure I understand the thinking behind this decision. Can you walk me through it?" Which is a way of opening a door without kicking it down.
Phrase 4, the upward feedback frame. When you need to raise a concern with a manager in English, use this. "I want to make sure we get the best outcome here. I have a concern I'd like to raise. Is now a good time?" That phrase positions the feedback as being about the outcome, not about the manager's decision. It signals positive intent, and it asks for permission, which shows respect for the hierarchy. In every culture, this lands well.
That is so much better than what I used to do, which was just send a long email with a lot of bullet points explaining why I thought a decision was wrong, which in hindsight was very American and very tone-deaf.
Now, one final area, written feedback, because more and more feedback happens in writing, in emails, in documents, in project management tools. And written feedback is even harder to calibrate across cultures because you lose tone of voice, facial expression, and all the non-verbal signals. Phrase 5 for written feedback. Always open with the purpose. Before you give any written feedback, write one sentence explaining why you are giving it. "I'm reviewing this before it goes to the client, so I want to make sure it is as strong as possible." That sentence changes everything. It tells the reader, this is not a personal attack. This is professional support. And in every culture, that framing makes the feedback land better.
I started doing this, and the response to my written feedback completely changed. People stopped getting defensive. They started engaging with the content. because they understood why I was giving it.
Your exercise for this week. Think of one piece of feedback you need to give to a colleague, a team member, or a manager. Write it out using the behavior impact structure. What was the specific behavior? What was the impact? No judgment, no emotion, just observation and consequence. Then use the specific and respectful frame to open the conversation. One piece of feedback, done properly, is worth more than 10 vague comments. Ryan, Sofia, brilliant conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. This stuff genuinely matters. The ability to give and receive feedback well is probably the most important professional skill nobody ever teaches you.
Completely agree. And in international business, it is even more important because the cultural assumptions are so different. Thank you for this conversation.
This was Lead in English from BEAL, the Business English Academy for Leadership and Management, based in Verl, Germany. If your team needs to give and receive feedback confidently in English across cultures, visit bealacademy.de or find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying our weekly podcasts. And I hope for you to join me and my guests again in episode 7.